Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. We're so excited to be starting our second part. I'm going to sneak into the video for a second. I need to say exactly who you are. Right. Thank you so much. Our second part of the series. This time we're honored to have Mr. Meir speak about his experience of growing up in Egypt. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time, but without further ado, Mr. Meir.
Shalom. Kohelet, it starts by saying the words of Kohelet, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Before he gives his information, he gives his credential that he was Shlomo, a melech, which means he was wise. He was the son of David. That means what he's about to tell us is also come from tradition. And he was a king. In other words, I don't think he was just sitting in the tent. He knew about politics and so on. I think all the books you see immediately says about the author. I think they must have copied from there. So I have to let you know my credential to talk about Jews in Egypt. I don't have any. There was 80,000 Jews in Egypt around 1948. That was the estimate. And they come from different levels, different class, different Jewish observance, different background. So it would be very hard for me, who did not study sociology or history, to give you a real picture of all the Jews of Egypt. I can only give it through the prism of my growing up and my family. So my name is Moshe Hamawi. I was born in 1949 in Egypt and left in 1965 at the age of 16. Growing up in Egypt at 16, you're quite mature already. So that's what we'll talk about it. So take what I say through that prism. It was 80,000 Jews. Now there is about less than 16 Jews in Egypt. So that was a very big thing, that 80,000 Jews got extracted from the country they grew in, where they did their business, where they made their money, they made their family, was very close families. And the reason I'm saying that, because once I had a conversation with an Israeli, and I made a political comment about Israel, and he told me you should not talk about Israel unless you went and did the army. The poor guy did not know, but he got it, because the Jews, both Sepharad and Ashkenaz of the Middle East, paid the price for having the land of Israel. The price was nothing compared or pale to the atrocities German people did to the Jews, of course. But nonetheless, after the war finished, a lot of Jews from the Middle East had to leave their place. A lot of them died just from the sadness of losing their business, their money. I had a friend whose father passed away on the boat to France, just from a heart attack, from losing everything that he had. And as a matter of fact, just to give you an idea of the atmosphere in Egypt, in a little bit before Israel was formed, the Zionists used to come. Zionists came to Egypt and recruit, boys and girls to go to Israel and so forth. My uncle and my aunt from my mother's side went, and they went to Kibbutz Afikim. And my father told them, because of Sniut, he didn't like the idea that they put boys and girls together. He told them they were also selling land in Israel before Israel was made. to help raise money. So he told them, okay, I'll buy land, but stay away from my daughters. I don't want you talking to my daughters about going to Israel or anything like that. So they gave him papers and he paid the money and he hid the papers on top of the armoire. He didn't have closet. They had, piece of furniture where they put their clothes. So he hid the papers over there. 2 years later or so, my sister was getting engaged, and so they had a lot of visitors coming at night, party like different families visiting and so on. A neighbor or so said, no, accused to the government, said, they must have, they're Jews, they must have Zionist meetings. So one day my father comes to the house and he sees the secret police had put my mother on the floor and all the kids sitting on the floor, and they were searching the house. Of course, he got very scared that they find those papers saying he's buying land in Israel. And he called the chief of police because he knew him. And the chief of police told the secret police, no, there's no problem there and so on. And that was gone. But the next day he woke up, told my mother, I have chest pain. And it was kind of a heart attack. And of course, the doctors at the time tell the patient, okay, oh, you have heart problems, stay in bed and so on. 2-3 years later, he passed away. So it's just to give you an idea of the price that Jews in the Sephardic and Ashkenazi communities that lived in the Middle East paid for Israel. Also, there was a Suez debacle. For people who are not familiar with that history, Israel counted on the English and the French that they will start the attack for the Suez Canal. And then after that, the English and the French would join in. But Israel attacked, and French and the English did not keep their promise because both Russia and US told them not to. So that gives the excuse to then President Nasser to expel all foreigners from Egypt, not necessarily the Jews, but the foreigners, which mostly were Jews. We had the papers that said we are stateless. In other words, not French, not English, but my sisters had to leave because their husband had French passports and so forth. So we stayed without seeing my sister for 8 years, in 56 to 1965. So it was kind of hard for all the Jews in Egypt. Of course, it does not pay for what the Germans did. And I say Germans, I don't say Nazis, because I learned from Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, Yocham Racha. He said you have to say the German people, don't say Nazis, because at the end of the war, there was hardly 10 Nazis left. We cannot judge this generation for the people of the past generation, but we cannot forget what those people are capable of. Okay, anyway, so about Egypt, and in Egypt, we had what we call the Rabbanut, just like in Israel. And the Egyptian government gave the authority to the Rabbanut to take care of the Jewish affairs as far as marriages, divorce, their synagogue, their homes for the elderly. We had in Egypt, we had a Jewish hospital. We had Jewish schools. We had almost every synagogue had next to it a building for the elderly and the people with dementia or things like that, which, by the way, is a very good trick to make sure you always have a minyan. You could go 24/7 for Hazkara, and you can get a minyan for Kaddish, because you just go to the elderly home and get 10 people. Okay, the observance in Egypt varied from people to people. Definitely, like once we had a guy here from South Africa said something very good. He said, you had very religious, less religious, and so forth, but we never had conservative or reforms. He said, we never moved the goalposts. So you'll see somebody, breaking many laws, but once he's in the synagogue, oh, he screams at the Hazan and tell him, you skipped al Nasiyah, you have to repeat and so forth. So they never moved the goalposts. There was in Egypt, in Cairo, there was an area, it's called Harit al-Yahud, which was basically the Jewish neighborhood. There, Rabbi Obadia Yosef, was a teacher. He taught like 13, 14 students that all became very big rabbis, some are in New York and so on. And they were very religious, but everybody had a very high level of piety. Anytime you go to the synagogue, there was always 2, 3 people reading Tehillim. And, people would come, give them, $1, $2, and say, oh, say something for me and so on. There was, I have to say that in Egypt, and I saw in the rest of the Middle East, but especially in what I can talk about is Egypt, there was a big consciousness of God, more than you see everywhere else, except Israel and Jerusalem, of course. You could see the Christian, the Coptic, a lot of, about 30 to 35% of the population in Egypt is Coptic. They even believe that they are the true Egyptians, not the Muslims. So you see them with the long robe and so on. You hear the Muslim guy calling for prayers. It was compact with the consciousness of there is a God, So that influenced people. Okay, so an example of piety is a small story, but to give you an idea of the level of people. My sister had just married, and there was a gathering, and they asked her husband, newlywed, do you miss the bachelor's days? And he said, oh yeah, don't remind me of the liberty of the bachelor's days. On Friday night, his brothers sitting at the table with his father related that joke and that story that happened. The father went in the morning to the synagogue in Cairo, and then he walked for almost an hour and 20 minutes, and he was not a young man. And then went up 4 floors on Shabbat, and knocked at my sister's door. She opened the door. He told her, hi, Shalom. She got scared. She said, what happened? I said, no, I just want to talk to Jackie. And then he told her, listen, I'm sorry about what Jackie said. Oh, he misses that was her husband. Jackie was her husband. And he said, I think my son was joking. He could not give Musar to his son, but he asked him to apologize for his sister. And he told him, how can you tell Rita, my sister, how can you say something like this in front of her? So it's just to show you how pious those people were, to walk all this time and so on, just to make sure his son does not hurt the feeling of his newlywed wife. It says a lot about those people. When I got my first art school book, I read, and I got sad that I said, boy, in Egypt, I wish we had those books. They were just sitting down and reading Tehillim and so on. Well, now after 50 years of, brain gymnastics between books and learning from rabbis, this and that, slowly I'm coming to the conclusion, the best thing to do is to just sit and read Tehillim and for the sake of Hashem. The schooling, we had a Jewish school, You can show the first, maybe the slide of the house.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show you some pictures to give you an idea. Okay. That's fine. All right, we can start with this. This is the house we were living in. It's a two tenants house. We were on the second floor, and it happened to be half a block from the French school, Collège des Frères. And so unfortunately, that's where I went to school instead of the Jewish school, which was, further away. The architecture of Egypt and so forth, very much kind of like in Israel. Hamavdir, of course, in Israel, it's much prettier. It's one anecdote. My older sister was visiting Israel, and she went around with my son Nessim, and while visiting Israel, she told him, I feel like home. So he laughed at her and said, well, you grew up only 5 hours from here. So if you want to have an idea of how the Egypt suburb looks like, that's it's very much like in Jerusalem or this kind of place.
Next picture.
Okay, let's go to the first picture, like you want. That's my father and mother and my oldest brother at the beach. That's how we dress us to go to the beach. They felt that their clothing is, is the dignity of a man, They will never get caught in shorts or something like that. You see, even the Egyptians, they will go in the metro and they will be with jacket and tie and a newspaper under their arm. Always a newspaper under their arm to tell you they are educated, they can read, don't think they are peasants, So everybody.
Do you ever go in the water?
Huh?
Do you ever go in the water?
No, okay. This is me, by the way, outside the synagogue. I think that was Purim. By the way, in Egypt, you had 2 Purims. The rabbis instituted a Purim because at one time there was Ottoman Empire, and they had put somebody who was very bad to the Jews, and I declared that he's going to do even more worse things to them in a month from now. So they sent an emissary to the king, and he talked to him, told him about what that guy was doing to the Jews and so forth. So he replaced him and put somebody who was very much pro-Jewish and took away all so the rabbis of Egypt declared as a custom to make a Purim. I think they added Hallel. There is a rabbi from Egypt in Italy who wrote a whole book about all the laws of that Purim. Okay, next. That's a wedding of my sister, because my father passed away, so her grandfather was accompanying her. You can see people also holding candles on the left and the right. And that's me here on the very right, on the bottom.
This one over here.
Flower boys, yeah. Okay. Nice. That's how they did the wedding. And notice something very nice that we can learn from. I go sometimes to weddings here, and the bride and groom are facing the Echal, and the rabbi is behind, and sometimes the rabbi is shorter than the bride and groom, so you get to see nothing, and the people, they want to see the bride and groom. But that's how they did in Egypt. They would kiss the Echal, and then they turn around. The rabbi knew his job. He would stay by the side and not to interfere for pictures and so forth. And that's how they conducted the wedding. By the way, about pictures, they had a very good trick. You go to weddings and you have to wait an hour until they finish taking pictures and so on. They didn't do that. They took some pictures during the wedding and so forth. But a week, 2 weeks after the wedding, they would dress up just like in the wedding and so on, and go to the office of the photographer and take pictures again over there, you know? Okay, so that's after the wedding, that's just the families in Egypt. In Egypt, we didn't have assimilation. You can count on, one hand, maybe the cases. And when I say no assimilation, I mean no assimilation outside the families. That means they would marry between cousins, or if the father did not know the boy since his Brit Milah, it was very hard for him to give his daughter away, That to be somebody in the family. Of course, in this case here of my sister, my father passed away already. The husband was recommended by my grandfather, who was a very religious family. That's a father that I told you walked for an hour and a half just to tell story. And I know I am rambling, but just to give you an idea, I
that's
was not
perfect.
able to, there is so much to say about Jews in Egypt that I couldn't put it down. That's one of my uncles. He takes a picture, but he holds the Tehillim book. That's, it was all, fake. We didn't have many books, like Gemara books and so on. That was like only in the library in Cairo and so on. My grandfather was from Jerusalem, originally from my mother's side. He had like 2 or 3 Gemara books, and his wife would laugh. She said, he's reading the same book for 30 years, the 2 or 3 books. Okay, next picture. That's my father again. And you notice he has a tarbush. He passed, he was 46 years old, but you can see how it's mature things. Okay, that's again him in the beach.
Second.
That's it. Oh, this is me in my bar mitzvah in the synagogue. So I will tell you, if you notice, the synagogue had a 2nd floor. That's where the women are. They go all around the 2nd floor. Rabbi Eliyahu told me we put the women on the 2nd floor because we put our women on our head, So I always wanted to know what is the view from the 2nd floor, But I will not go, my brothers and so on, they tell me, no, if you go to the women's side, you will get feminine forces attached to you. So I get scared. I come here and I see people, there's no room, they sit in the women's section. It's amazing to me, wow. So
That's all the pictures.
the Echal was the whole length of the building was the Echal. On Simchat Torah, they will bring ladder to bring out all the Torah. It was like 100 Torah. Most of them were pasul because they were 100 years old and so on. However, you see all the columns, they have marbles, carpets, everybody, when it comes to holiday, they change carpets, very expensive carpets. There was a man who was not very important in teaching that you cannot go without a building. You have to have a building, you have to have faith for the repair and so on. But you have to keep your eye on the ball, which is making sure the kids are learning. So that's the story. There is as can I tell you about Egypt? There was a Rambam synagogue in Egypt, and in Egypt you take a test at the end of the year, and if you pass the test, you go on to the next class. But if you fail even one subject, you have to repeat the whole year. If somebody probably gets sick and misses the test, he has to repeat the whole year. So it was my brothers, before the final test every year, they would go to the Rambam synagogue and read something or take a little nap. We're not supposed to sleep in the synagogue, but they had some place like a little bit outside. I don't know exactly. People who were sick would go and sleep and plus the overnight there. In 1956, when there was the problem with the Suez Canal, the Arabs gathered and wanted to go and break the synagogue. The Arabs of the neighborhood stood all around the Rambam synagogue with their sticks, said, nobody comes here, he's the doctor. they always felt protected in that area thanks to the Rambam. Look how long ago they go back and so on.
Like every day they were afraid to walk around, to
So-
like safe, how it's compared.
Your experience.
Yeah, so what happens when you are under a dictatorship, everybody is scared, not just the Jews, the Christian and the Muslims. Except for those incidents of 1956 and 1967, you live with the fear in your background, but then you live with it. You use a lot of bribery to know the chief of police and so on. That's the Jewish people way of dealing with it. But I cannot say I was any more afraid. I was a little bit more afraid than my non-Jewish friends, But you just live with it. It's not something that's like in your face all the time. But in 1967, after the 67 war, the Egyptians gathered all the adult Jews, 18 years old and over, and put them in jail, supposedly to protect them from fear that the Arabs who lost people at the war would come and attack the Jews. So, and then little by little, they let them out. The Egyptian government was always more concerned with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's who they worried about. They didn't worry about the Jews. The Jews were a source of income for them.
Someone wants to know how many generations has your family been in Egypt?
2 generations. That's a good question. Most of the Jews of Egypt, the majority of the Jews of Egypt, they are really Syrian. They came from Syria. There was also in Egypt, we had Karaite. Karaite is a sect of that they don't believe in the rabbis. They believe in following the Torah like it's written. So we laugh at them always because, like Bayaw said, ask them what this letter. He says this is the letter Beit. But who told you it's the letter Beit? Maybe this is Aleph. You must have listened to a rabbi who told you that. So anyway, but a lot of them immigrated to the US now and so on, and they're getting absorbed. There is in Haifa, I think, a little bit of that sect. They have their synagogue and so on. They did not believe in even in moving during Shabbat. They would suppose they have to stay in their place, but there was animosity between the Jews and them because the legend goes, I don't know if it's true, that many years ago, when there was like a pogrom against the Jews, they would point to the Arabs where the Jews were, and they would never get forgiven. I don't know if that story is true or not, but that's how we were brought up.
There's something you miss in Egypt. I mean, you don't have it. It's only like you have something you like to have memory, you wish you can be
Well,
there.
the biggest thing is that the families, they were very close to each other. Within a few blocks, you had sisters, cousins, second cousins, third cousins, and so forth. And now, in case of my family, some went to Geneva. My sister went to Dakar in South Africa. Some went to Brazil. It's a complete disaster as far as that is concerned. So it broke the rock.
Yours are all coming to Jacksonville.
Right. Well, it's a very good thing. A wise man, I don't want to say who it was, came in our synagogue and talked around 1957. And he said, I know that a lot of people are thinking of leaving Egypt, and you are apprehensive because you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your homes, your businesses, and so forth. But I can tell you, you're going to go, you're going to have new friends, you're going to have new homes, better homes, you're going to open new businesses, better businesses. But one thing you will not find is the people you left behind, which people who are buried, basically. So make sure you go and visit them before you leave. So if you ask me that question, I will tell you that I cannot go visit the cemetery of my dad and uncles and so forth. That's one thing. But I will not go to Egypt because I'll be scared, because you can never trust them. You can go there and they can have a coup and the whole thing turns around, they close the airports and so forth. Yeah. Much better to go visit Israel. There's nothing in Egypt that you cannot find in Egypt.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How long ago you leave from Egypt
I left,
and why you leave from Egypt? What was the main reason you leave?
we left Egypt in 1965. There was rumors from the US embassy and from, Pan Am and TWA, which was all CIA people, I should not say that. That's the impression they gave us, but I don't know if it's true. That, you better leave, So we left at that time. And we left, and the Jewish Federation helped us a lot. We went from Egypt to France, and there we stayed 6 months until the US government bans us to make sure we are not communists and things like that. And during those 6 months, the US helps us to pay for the hotel and things like that. But our papers in France is like somebody who come and the airplane is delayed. It's thanks to a bill by Kennedy that he put in that people persecuted in other countries can come in. So we came. The social worker asked if we had any family in America, and my mother had a brother in Syracuse, New York. So we told her in Syracuse, New York, she said, then you should go to Syracuse, New York. We didn't know freedom. We don't want to upset her or, it's government stuff with those, So we ended up in Syracuse, New York. So that's a big change for people from Egypt to Syracuse, New York. But we are always grateful. It was he as part of the Jewish Federation that helped out. So
How much of your family came?
it was myself, my mother, and my brother. My second brother had left Egypt 2 years before. And a lot of when you left Egypt, you were allowed only $20 per person. So a lot of Jews were able to send their money beforehand. They get 25 cents to the dollar and so on. You get an Egyptian that does import or export, so you import the merchandise, and then they pay you with the money, and you give him the money in Egypt. So you give him $1 in Egypt, and you get 25 cents from the guy that he exported to, things like that, So they did that. And you try to get along. I'll tell you a funny story. My mother had to get some paper from the government, but all legal, she had the right about the building that we had and so on. So we took the metro, we went to Cairo, and on the way to the office, my mother stops at the butcher and she buys 2-3 kilos of meat. I don't understand why she says and why we're going to have to carry it, You can buy it on the way back, and we normally eat chicken. The guy comes with the chicken. He comes upstairs. My mother chooses 2-3 chickens, and then she had a cousin with a short head. He come, that week or so, and he cut the chicken. So what is he doing by him? So we go to the office, and she's talking to the clerk there to get the paper, and she puts the meat on the table there on the thing. And she tells him, by the way, you should go to the butcher. He has a lot of meat, and he's giving it at a very good price. It's very good meat. It's 5 piastres a pound, like 25 cents a pound. It was like $1.50 a pound, not 20 cents. He says, yeah. He said, yeah, you should go and buy. By the way, if you want to buy this, I'll buy again one. This. So he says, okay, I'll take yours. So he gives her. He counts the money, He gives her 75 cents, right? It was cost like $10, And that facilitates the papers and so on. So they get along, things like that. Okay, time up.
Yeah, whatever you want. Any questions? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I just would like to introduce myself. I am Moi's brother, just in case you guys are looking at my name.
That's my brother Davido, it's David.
Mois,
Yeah.
with your permission, can I show them a picture?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is a picture of the tomb of my father, actually. Now, if you look, you see how all the tombs are without the marble and the granite on top. Well, the Egyptians, they took everything to recycle. All the marble, you can tell, you can see how they destroyed everything. I went to Egypt maybe about 20 years ago, and I tried to find my father too. It took us, me and my son, 4 hours trying to find it. Finally, you see the black one down here? This is my father tomb, the only one standing with the name on it and everything, like all the writing and everything on it. The rest, like you can see, everything is destroyed.
Wow,
But that was a miracle.
it was America.
That tomb, it has a triangle up. This way, nobody would walk on top of him, you know? And friend was a civil engineer, and he made cement all around the tomb. He got one big piece of granite from Italy, and then there was iron coming out of it, and he put it through the holes of this, and then they put the cement. It's so close, they cannot, they cannot.
Wow.
Okay, so
That's my big brother.
Sweet.
it's up to you. Yeah, if you want, or you want to stop or whatever you want.
No, I stopped before I say too many stupid things.
What's
Yeah. Okay.
okay.
Okay, thank you very much.